The blood-red sun hung low over the dusty horizon as Hannah Vance stepped off the stagecoach in Salida, Colorado Territory, clutching a crumpled letter and the last of her hopes. April 1876 had arrived with unforgiving winds and the promise of a new beginning, though the sight that greeted her was nothing like she had imagined. Instead of the tall, broad-shouldered figure of Preston Owens, the man whose advertisement had brought her across half the country, a different man waited, hat in hand, with the same piercing blue eyes she'd seen in the daguerreotype her betrothed had sent. "Miss Vance," he called, stepping forward with hesitation threading his movements. "I'm Patrick Owens, Preston's brother." Hannah's heart sank as she scanned the crowd behind him. "Where's Preston? Has something happened?" The dust from the departing stagecoach settled around her skirts as the final passengers retrieved their luggage. Patrick's face tightened, his sun-weathered skin creasing at the corners of his eyes. "I'm afraid I have some difficult news, madam. Preston. He's gone. Pneumonia took him 3 weeks ago." The world seemed to tilt beneath Hannah's feet. She'd left everything behind: her position as a schoolteacher in Boston, her small apartment, the few friends she had, all for a man who now lay cold in the ground. "I'm truly sorry," Patrick continued, his voice rough with what seemed like genuine regret. "I sent a telegram, but it must not have reached you before you departed." He paused, taking a step closer. "The thing is, miss, I believe you were meant to come here. Meant for me." Hannah's head snapped up. "I beg your pardon?" Patrick looked embarrassed, removing his hat to reveal thick brown hair, slightly darker than Preston's had been in the photograph. "That came out wrong. What I mean to say is, Preston spoke highly of you in his letters. Said you were exactly what this ranch needed, what we needed." He gestured vaguely toward the mountain backdrop. "I'd be honored if you'd at least consider staying. Not as my wife, of course," he added hastily, "but as our housekeeper, perhaps, until you decide what you want to do." "Housekeeper," Hannah repeated, the word tasting bitter on her tongue. She had come to be a wife, not a servant. "With pay," Patrick quickly amended. "Good pay. And your own quarters in the main house. It's just, we're in desperate need, and you've come all this way." The alternative was unthinkable: spending what remained of her savings on a return ticket to a city that no longer held anything for her. Hannah sighed, looking at the handful of buildings that constituted Salida's main street. "I'll consider it. For a month," she finally said. "After that, we'll see." Patrick's relief was palpable. "That's all I ask. Let me take your trunk, my wagon's just over there." As they loaded her meager possessions, Hannah couldn't help but notice the way Patrick's hands worked, strong but gentle, like a man accustomed to both hard labor and careful tasks. They weren't Preston's hands, but they belonged to a man who had Preston's eyes. The journey to the Owens ranch took nearly 2 hours, the wagon creaking along rutted paths that eventually gave way to a narrow trail winding up into the foothills. Patrick spoke little, occasionally pointing out landmarks or sharing brief stories about the area's history. Hannah learned that the Owens brothers had built their ranch from scratch over the past 5 years, after moving west from Illinois with dreams of raising horses. "Preston was the dreamer," Patrick said softly as they crested a hill, revealing a sprawling valley below. "I was always the practical one. And yet he was the one who wrote to me," Hannah mused, her fingers tracing the worn edges of the letter in her pocket. Patrick's jaw tightened. "Actually, miss, there's something you should know about that." Before he could continue, they rounded a bend, and the Owens ranch came into view. A sturdy 2-story house stood proudly in the center of the property, with several outbuildings scattered nearby and a large corral holding at least a dozen horses. Smoke rose from the chimney, and Hannah could make out a figure moving around the porch. "That's Maria," Patrick explained. "She comes in from town 3 times a week to cook and help with cleaning, but she has her own family to care for. We need someone permanent." Hannah nodded, digesting this information along with the unexpected beauty of the ranch. It wasn't the life she had imagined, but perhaps it could be a beginning. The wagon pulled up to the house, and Maria, a plump, pleasant-faced woman of perhaps 50, hurried down to greet them. Her quick, assessing gaze took in Hannah's travel-worn appearance and seemingly found it satisfactory. "Welcome, señorita," she said warmly. "I have prepared the blue room for you, and supper will be ready soon. You must be exhausted from your journey." Hannah thanked her with genuine gratitude. After weeks of travel, the prospect of a clean room and a home-cooked meal seemed like luxury itself. As Patrick carried her trunk upstairs, Hannah took stock of her surroundings. The house was well built and surprisingly refined for a bachelor's home. The furniture was solid and practical, but there were touches: hand-woven rugs, landscape paintings, books lining shelves that spoke of a desire for civilization in this wild place. Her room was small but comfortable, with a window overlooking the mountains and a quilt-covered bed that invited immediate collapse. Hannah resisted the urge, washing her face and hands in the basin provided before changing into her cleanest remaining dress. Downstairs, the smell of beef stew and fresh bread drew her to the kitchen, where Maria was giving final instructions to Patrick. "Remember, the bread must cool before you cut it, or it will all fall to pieces," she was saying sternly. "And there is apple pie for tomorrow. Do not touch it tonight." Patrick nodded solemnly, though Hannah caught the twinkle in his eye. "Yes, madam. Not a crumb until tomorrow." Maria huffed, clearly not believing him for a moment, before turning to Hannah. "Ah, there you are. You sit, eat. I must go now. My Manuel will be wondering where his dinner is." After Maria's whirlwind departure, an awkward silence fell between Hannah and Patrick as they sat at the sturdy oak table. Patrick served the stew with careful movements, his large hands somehow managing to ladle the hearty mixture without spilling a drop. "It's not what you expected," he said finally, not meeting her eyes. "Coming all this way to find Preston gone, and his brother offering you a job instead of marriage." Hannah took a bite of the stew, savoring the rich flavors before responding. "Life rarely gives us what we expect, Mr. Owens. My father died when I was 15, my mother last year. I've learned to adapt." "Patrick," he corrected gently. "Please, Patrick," she conceded. "What was it that drew you to Preston's advertisement?" he asked, breaking off a piece of bread. "If you don't mind my asking." Hannah considered the question. "Honesty, I suppose. His letter spoke of hard work and simple pleasures. He didn't promise riches or an easy life, just partnership." She paused, remembering. "And he mentioned the mountains. I've always wanted to see real mountains." Patrick nodded, a shadow crossing his features. "Preston had a way with words. You mentioned earlier there was something I should know," Hannah prompted, curiosity finally getting the better of her. "About the letter." Patrick set down his spoon, tension evident in the set of his shoulders. "Yes, This isn't easy to explain." He took a deep breath. "The truth is, Preston didn't write those letters. I did." Hannah stared at him, uncomprehending. "I don't understand." "Preston could barely read, let alone write like that," Patrick explained, each word seemingly dragged from him. "He had ideas, good ones, but putting them to paper was beyond him. So I wrote the advertisements, and I answered the responses that seemed most promising." His eyes finally met hers, troubled but direct. "Including yours." Hannah's mind raced, trying to process this revelation. "So the words I responded to, the person I thought I was communicating with all these months, was me," Patrick finished. "Preston approved everything, of course. I read him your letters, and he told me what to say in return. The match was his idea, and he was genuinely excited to meet you." His voice softened. "He liked your spirit, your education. Said you'd bring something special to the ranch." Hannah pushed her bowl away, appetite forgotten. So I've been corresponding with you all along, believing I was getting to know my future husband. I'm sorry for the deception, Patrick said quietly. It didn't seem important at the time. I was just Preston's hands for putting his thoughts on paper. But now that he's gone and you're here. He trailed off, looking genuinely distressed. Hannah stood abruptly. I need some air. Outside, the evening was settling over the valley, painting the mountains in deepening shades of purple and gold. Hannah walked to the porch railing, gripping it tightly as she tried to sort through her jumbled emotions. The man she had agreed to marry, the man whose words had convinced her to leave everything behind, had never really existed. Or rather, he had existed as a composite. Preston's ideas, Patrick's words. She heard the door open behind her but didn't turn. I'll take you back to town tomorrow, if that's what you want, Patrick said, his voice low and resigned. I understand if you feel misled. Hannah turned then, studying his face in the fading light. There was no guile there, only regret and something else, concern, perhaps. Did you mean them? She asked suddenly. The things you wrote about wanting a partner, not just a wife. About believing women have minds worth respecting. Were those Preston's sentiments or yours? Patrick seemed startled by the question. Both, I suppose. Preston wasn't much for reading poetry or discussing ideas, but he respected capable people, regardless of whether they wore trousers or skirts. He hesitated. The words about wanting someone to share books with, to talk about the stars and such, those might have been more mine than his. I see. Hannah turned back to the view, her mind working rapidly. I'll stay the month, as agreed. I need time to think, and I have nowhere else to go at the moment. Thank you, Patrick said, the relief in his voice unmistakable. I promise you'll be treated with respect here. As he retreated back into the house, Hannah remained on the porch, watching as the first stars appeared in the deepening blue sky. She had come west seeking a husband and found herself in mourning for a man she had never truly known. Yet somehow, in this strange twist of fate, she felt an unexpected thread of possibility, as if the story she had thought was ending might actually be just beginning. The next morning dawned clear and crisp, with the kind of sky-blue clarity that Hannah had never seen in Boston. She rose early, dressing in her plainest skirt and blouse, determined to prove her worth as more than just an unexpected burden. She found Patrick in the kitchen, frying bacon and looking somewhat harried. Good morning, she said, startling him. Miss Vance, I didn't expect you up so early. He gestured awkwardly with the fork in his hand. I was just trying to put something together before heading out to the stables. Hannah surveyed the kitchen, noting its general tidiness but also the subtle signs of bachelor living: mismatched plates, utensils stored without much organization, a pantry that seemed to contain an abundance of flour and beans but little else. Please allow me, she said, moving to take the fork from him. This is part of why I'm here, isn't it? To help with these matters. Patrick relinquished the cooking tools with visible relief. I'm afraid neither Preston nor I ever mastered anything beyond the basics. Maria does what she can, but... Well, I may not be a ranch hand, but I do know my way around a kitchen, Hannah assured him, already reaching for eggs. Why don't you show me around the house and property after breakfast? I should know what I'm dealing with. Over a simple but satisfying breakfast of bacon, eggs, and the last of Maria's bread, Patrick outlined the daily rhythms of ranch life. Two ranch hands, Hector and Virgil, lived in a small bunkhouse near the stables and handled most of the work with the horses. Patrick managed the business side and helped with training the animals. Preston was our true horse whisperer, Patrick explained, a note of pride mixing with sadness in his voice. He could gentle the wildest stallion you've ever seen. I'm decent enough, but he had the gift. What kind of horses do you raise? Hannah asked, genuinely curious. She had limited experience with horses beyond the occasional carriage ride in Boston. "Quarter horses, mostly," Patrick said, his eyes lighting up with enthusiasm. "Best cow horses you'll find anywhere. We're building a reputation for solid stock, not the flashiest, but dependable and smart. We also have a few thoroughbreds for those looking for speed." After breakfast, Patrick gave her the promised tour. The house was larger than it had initially appeared, with 4 bedrooms upstairs, a study, the kitchen and dining area, and a surprisingly cozy parlor complete with a piano. "Preston bought that when we first built the house," Patrick explained, noticing her surprise. "Said a proper home needed music. Neither of us could play a note, though." "I can," Hannah admitted. "My mother insisted on lessons." Patrick's face brightened. "Would you play something? Someday, when you're settled." "Perhaps," Hannah agreed, oddly touched by his enthusiasm. Outside, the property revealed itself as even more impressive in daylight. Besides the main house and stables, there was a blacksmith's shop, a large barn, fenced pastures stretching toward distant hills, and a kitchen garden that showed signs of neglect. "That was always Preston's project," Patrick said, following her gaze to the overgrown garden. "He had grand ideas about growing our own vegetables, but neither of us had the time or knowledge to make much of it." Hannah surveyed the tangled mess thoughtfully. "It has good soil from the look of it, and the growing season should be starting soon." "You garden?" Patrick asked. "My mother kept a small garden behind our townhouse," Hannah explained. "Nothing like this potential, but I know the basics." They continued to the stables, where Hannah was introduced to Hector and Virgil, the former a taciturn Mexican man in his 40s, the latter a freckled youth barely out of his teens. Both men tipped their hats respectfully, though Hannah caught the curious glances they exchanged. "Miss Vance will be staying on as our housekeeper," Patrick explained, his tone making it clear he would brook no argument or impropriety. "Welcome, Miss," Virgil said, his accent revealing Appalachian origins. "It'll be nice having a lady about the place." Hector merely nodded, but Hannah thought she detected approval in his dark eyes. The stables themselves were immaculate, housing about 20 horses in various stalls. Patrick introduced her to each one, his pride evident as he described their lineages and temperaments. "And this," he said finally, leading her to the last stall, "is Penny. She was to be yours. Preston picked her special when your last letter arrived." The mare was a beautiful chestnut with a white blaze down her face and intelligent eyes that regarded Hannah with interest. "She's gentle but spirited," Patrick continued. "Preston said that seemed fitting, based on your letters." Hannah reached out cautiously, letting the horse sniff her hand. "She's beautiful," she murmured, unexpectedly moved by this gift from a man she would never meet. "She's still yours," Patrick said quietly. "For riding, while you're here." Hannah glanced at him, surprised. "I don't really know how to ride, not properly." A smile tugged at Patrick's mouth. "Well, that's something we can remedy. Can't have anyone living at the Double Circle Ranch without knowing how to sit a horse." The name caught Hannah's attention. "Double Circle? Our brand," Patrick explained, using his finger to draw 2 interlocking circles in the air. "Preston came up with it. Said it represented partnership, his and mine, though I always thought he had marriage in mind, too. 2 circles, joined but distinct." Something about the symbol resonated with Hannah, though she couldn't quite articulate why. "It's a lovely concept," she said finally. The rest of the day passed in a flurry of activity as Hannah took stock of the house's needs. She discovered a pantry in dire need of organization, linens that required mending, and a general layer of dust in the less used rooms that spoke of bachelor priorities. By evening, she had compiled a list of tasks that would keep her busy for weeks. At supper, a simple affair of beans, ham, and cornbread that Hannah managed to assemble from the available ingredients. Patrick appeared genuinely impressed. "This is better than anything I've managed in months," he admitted, helping himself to a second serving. "Preston always said a woman's touch would improve things around here, but I had no idea how right he was." Hannah accepted the compliment with a nod, though something about the phrasing bothered her. "I hope my value extends beyond my gender, Mr. Owens." Patrick looked chagrined. "Patrick," he corrected automatically. "And of course it does. I didn't mean to imply that your education and intelligence are equally valuable. More so, perhaps." He paused, seeming to choose his next words carefully. "One of the things that stood out in your letters was your perspective on teaching, how you believed everyone could learn, given the right approach. That kind of thinking is rare out here." Hannah was surprised he remembered such specific details from her correspondence. "You have a good memory." A flush crept up Patrick's neck. "Your letters were memorable, full of ideas and observations I'd never considered." Preston enjoyed hearing them, but I think some of it went over his head. He smiled fondly. "He was more interested in your description of your mother's apple pie recipe, which I included at his request," Hannah recalled. "At his request," Patrick confirmed, "though I admit to having a sweet tooth myself." As the evening wore on, Hannah found herself revising her initial impressions of Patrick Owens. He was not just the practical counterpart to his dreamer brother. He possessed his own quiet thoughtfulness, a certain depth that revealed itself in unexpected moments. Later, as she prepared for bed in her small but comfortable room, Hannah found herself wondering about the strange twist of fate that had brought her here. She had expected to be a wife by now, not a housekeeper with uncertain future prospects. Yet there was something freeing about this arrangement, time to consider her next steps without the immediate demands of marriage. And then there was Patrick himself, a puzzle she couldn't quite solve. The man who had actually written the letters that had drawn her across the country, yet who now maintained a respectful distance that bordered on formality. He was her employer, not her betrothed. Yet she couldn't help but wonder what might have happened if it had been his advertisement she had answered directly. The thought was unsettling enough that Hannah quickly dismissed it, turning her attention instead to practical matters. Tomorrow, she decided, she would tackle the garden. Something about bringing order to that neglected plot seemed like the perfect metaphor for her current situation, finding possibility in unexpected circumstances. Spring unfolded rapidly across the Colorado foothills, bringing warm days, cool nights, and an explosion of wildflowers that transformed the landscape. Hannah's initial commitment of 1 month stretched into 2, then 3, as she found herself increasingly reluctant to leave the life she was building at the Double Circle. Under her care, the house had become a true home. Curtains that had languished in trunks now hung at freshly washed windows. The pantry boasted orderly rows of preserved goods. The garden yielded its first tender vegetables. Even the piano in the parlor occasionally rang with music in the evenings, when Hannah found time to practice. More surprising was how quickly she adapted to ranch life. True to his word, Patrick had begun teaching her to ride, starting with gentle lessons in the corral and progressing to short trail rides that revealed the breathtaking beauty of their surroundings. Penny proved to be the perfect mount, patient with Hannah's mistakes, but spirited enough to make riding a joy rather than a chore. "You're a natural," Patrick told her one afternoon as they returned from a ride along the creek that marked the eastern boundary of the ranch. Preston would have been pleased. The mention of Preston no longer brought the sharp pang it once had. Over weeks of conversations with Patrick, ranch hands, and occasional visitors from town, Hannah had pieced together a clearer picture of the man she had come to marry. He had been well-liked, hard-working, and kind-hearted, if somewhat impulsive. The community still spoke of him with genuine fondness. Yet Hannah couldn't help but notice that it was Patrick who remembered the details of her letters, Patrick, who thought to bring her wildflower specimens when he knew she was pressing them in a book. Patrick, whose quiet company she had come to anticipate each evening. The subtle shift in their relationship became apparent on a warm June evening when they sat on the porch after supper, watching fireflies emerge in the gathering dusk. Hannah had played the piano earlier, and the melodies still seemed to hang in the air between them. "I received a letter today," Hannah said finally, breaking the comfortable silence. "From my friend Eleanor in Boston. She's offered me a position at her father's school for the fall term." Patrick's hands stilled on the piece of wood he had been whittling. "I see," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "That's a fine opportunity." "It is," Hannah agreed. "Secure employment, a chance to return to teaching." "When would you leave?" The question was soft, almost lost in the chirping of crickets. "August, if I accept." Hannah turned to look at him directly. "Patrick, these months have been unexpected. When I came, I thought I would stay a few weeks at most. But now, he prompted when she faltered. Hannah took a deep breath. "Now I find myself reluctant to leave. This place, the work, it suits me in ways I never anticipated." Patrick set aside his carving, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her heart quicken. "Hannah, I would be lying if I said I wanted you to go. The ranch needs you." He paused, swallowing visibly. "I need you." "As your housekeeper?" Hannah asked, needing clarity. "No," Patrick said firmly, "though you excel at that too." He shifted in his chair, turning to face her fully. "When Preston died and I realized you were still coming, I told myself I was offering you a position out of duty to my brother. But the truth is, I already knew you from your letters. I felt I knew your mind, your heart. You knew the parts of me I chose to reveal in correspondence," Hannah corrected gently. "Yes," Patrick acknowledged, "and these past months have shown me that the real Hannah Vance is even more remarkable than the woman I imagined." His voice dropped lower. "I find myself wondering what might have happened if I had placed that advertisement for myself, not for Preston." The confession hung between them, fraught with possibility. Hannah felt her pulse quicken, aware they were approaching a precipice. "I have wondered the same thing," she admitted. "But Patrick, I came here as your brother's bride. Doesn't that complicate matters?" "Preston would have wanted your happiness," Patrick said firmly. "He wasn't a selfish man. If he could see how things have developed between us." He trailed off, seeming to realize he might be presuming too much. Hannah found herself smiling. "Are things developing between us, Mr. Owens?" The teasing question broke the tension, and Patrick's answering smile transformed his usually serious face. "I believe they are, Miss Vance, with your permission." "And if I gave such permission," Hannah continued, her voice steadier than she felt, "what exactly would you propose?" Patrick reached out slowly, taking her hand in his. The touch was gentle but sure, his calloused fingers warm against her skin. "I would propose courtship, proper and respectful. I would propose the chance to see if what's growing between us might flourish into something lasting. And the ranch, my position here, would continue exactly as it is for now," Patrick assured her. "I'm asking for a chance, Hannah, not a commitment. If, by August, you decide Boston is where you belong," his voice caught slightly, "then I will wish you well and always remember these months as a gift." Hannah looked down at their joined hands, then back at his face, finding there an earnestness that moved her deeply. "I believe I would like to be courted by you, Patrick Owens." The smile that broke across his face was like sunrise over the mountains, gradual, then suddenly radiant. "You've made me very happy," he said simply. That night, Hannah lay awake long after retiring, replaying the conversation in her mind. What had begun as a practical arrangement born of tragedy was transforming into something neither of them could have predicted. It should have felt strange falling for her intended's brother, yet somehow it felt like finding a path that had been waiting for her all along. Summer bloomed fully across the ranch, bringing with it longer days, afternoon thunderstorms, and a steady rhythm of work that Hannah found deeply satisfying. The garden flourished under her care, providing fresh vegetables for their table and enough surplus to trade with neighbors. The house had never been more orderly or welcoming, and Hannah had even begun helping with the ranch books, discovering a talent for figures that complemented Patrick's knowledge of the business. Their courtship progressed with careful respect on Patrick's part and growing affection on Hannah's. Their rides together extended further into the surrounding countryside, sometimes with a packed lunch that allowed them to spend whole afternoons exploring hidden valleys and breathtaking vistas. In the evenings, they often read aloud to each other from Patrick's surprisingly extensive library, discovering shared favorites and introducing each other to new authors. One particularly memorable afternoon in late July found them riding to a high meadow overlooking the valley, where wildflowers painted the landscape in vibrant purples, yellows, and blues. They had spread a blanket beneath a solitary pine tree and unpacked a simple meal of cold chicken, bread, and early apples from the tree behind the house. "I never knew the world could look like this," Hannah said, gazing out at the panorama before them. "In Boston, everything is so contained, so defined by human boundaries. Out here, it's as if the land itself is alive." Patrick nodded, understanding in his eyes. "That's what drew Preston and me west. We visited Colorado during the war. We were Union scouts and promised ourselves we'd return when peace came." His expression grew distant. "So many didn't make it home. We felt doubly blessed to have survived and to find this land still waiting." Hannah studied his profile, realizing how rarely he spoke of his wartime experiences. "You must have been very young." 18 when we enlisted, 22 when it ended," Patrick confirmed. Preston was 20, old enough to have seen things no one should see, young enough to still believe we could build something untouched by all that darkness. Hannah reached out, placing her hand over his. "And you have. The double circle is everything he dreamed it could be." Patrick turned his hand to clasp hers. "Not everything," he said quietly. "Preston always said the ranch wouldn't be complete without children running around someday. A family to pass it on to." The statement hung between them, weighted with implication. Hannah felt a flutter of something like anticipation mixed with uncertainty. "Patrick," she began carefully, "are you speaking in hypotheticals, or are you asking me something specific?" He met her gaze directly, a vulnerability in his blue eyes that tugged at her heart. "I had a whole speech planned," he admitted ruefully. "Was going to wait until sunset, make it properly romantic. But sitting here with you, looking out at all this beauty," he gestured at the sweeping vista, "I find I can't wait another minute to ask if you might consider making this your permanent home. As my wife." Though she had sensed the direction of his thoughts, the actual proposal still took Hannah's breath away. She looked out at the landscape spread before them, the ranch buildings tiny in the distance, the mountains rising majestically beyond, the endless sky arching overhead, and felt a profound certainty settle in her heart. "When I left Boston," she said slowly, "I thought I was traveling toward a predestined future, a marriage arranged through letters, a life mapped out in advance." She turned back to him, squeezing his hand. "Instead, I found something far more precious, a chance to choose my own path. And that path, Patrick Owens, leads straight to you." His eyes widened. "Is that a yes?" Hannah laughed, the sound bright and clear in the mountain air. "Yes, Patrick. I will marry you." The kiss that followed was gentle at first, then deepening with a warmth that seemed to echo the summer sun overhead. When they finally drew apart, Patrick rested his forehead against hers, his expression alight with joy. "I never expected this," he murmured. "When I saw you step off that stagecoach, looking so lost and determined all at once, I thought I was merely doing right by Preston, offering you a place to stay. I never imagined that you'd end up proposing to your brother's mail-order bride?" Hannah finished for him, her tone gently teasing. Patrick chuckled, the sound rumbling through his chest. "Life takes strange turns sometimes." "Indeed it does," Hannah agreed, thinking of all the coincidences and choices that had led to this moment. "But I can't help feeling that this particular turn was meant to be." The ride back to the ranch was filled with plans and possibilities. They decided on a simple ceremony in September, after the busiest season of ranch work had eased. Hannah would write to Eleanor declining the teaching position, explaining her choice to build a life in Colorado instead. "We should invite the whole valley," Patrick was saying as they approached the ranch. "Make it a proper celebration." Preston would have wanted that. He loved any excuse for gathering folks together. Hannah nodded, noticing how Patrick now spoke of his brother with fondness unmarred by grief. Time was healing those wounds, allowing Preston's memory to take its rightful place in their shared history without overshadowing their future. As they crested the final hill, the ranch spread out below them, golden in the late afternoon light. Hannah felt a surge of belonging so powerful it brought tears to her eyes. This place, these mountains, this house, this land had somehow become home when she wasn't looking. "Are you certain, Hannah?" Patrick asked softly, noticing her emotional reaction. "Boston has so much more to offer in terms of society, culture, and so much less in terms of beauty, freedom, and love," Hannah countered firmly. "I'm certain, Patrick. This is where I belong." The news of their engagement spread quickly through the small community surrounding Salida. Most reactions were warmly congratulatory, though Hannah occasionally caught glimpses of speculation in some faces, curiosity about the woman who had come to marry one brother only to end up engaged to another. Such whispers bothered her less than she might have expected. Those who knew the Owens brothers best seemed to find nothing strange in how events had unfolded. Indeed, several of their neighbors commented that they had seen it coming from the moment Hannah decided to stay beyond her initial month. Maria was particularly effusive in her approval, enveloping Hannah in a crushing embrace when they shared the news. "Gracias a Dios," she exclaimed. "That man has been alone too long. He needs a good woman to bring laughter back to this house." Preparations for the wedding took shape alongside the daily rhythms of ranch life. Hannah ordered fabric from Denver for a new dress, choosing a practical blue silk that could serve for both the ceremony and future special occasions. Patrick, with touching determination, began expanding the garden and building new furniture for their shared bedroom, including a larger wardrobe to accommodate Hannah's belongings. August arrived with its fierce heat and dramatic thunderstorms, bringing with it unexpected news. A letter came from a horse buyer in St. Louis who had purchased 2 of Preston's best-trained horses the previous year. The man was so impressed with their quality that he wanted to visit personally to discuss a larger purchase, potentially enough horses to secure the ranch's financial stability for years to come. "This could change everything," Patrick told Hannah excitedly as they sat on the porch one evening, the letter spread between them. "Preston always believed our horses could compete with the best stock in the country. This proves he was right. When will Mr. Caldwell arrive?" Hannah asked, scanning the elegantly penned letter. "Mid-September, according to this," Patrick replied. "Right around the time we planned for the wedding." Hannah considered this. Perhaps we should move the ceremony forward? Or delay it until after his visit? Patrick took her hand, his expression serious. "I won't postpone marrying you for business, no matter how important. But if you wouldn't mind bringing the date forward, I wouldn't mind at all," Hannah assured him. 2 weeks from Saturday would still give us time to notify everyone. And I'd rather not wait, truth be told. The smile Patrick gave her was worth any amount of hasty preparation. 2 weeks from Saturday it is, then. I'll ride into town tomorrow to speak with Reverend Miller. The following days passed in a whirlwind of activity. Invitations were dispatched to neighbors and friends. Maria recruited several local women to help prepare food for the celebration. Patrick and the ranch hands worked tirelessly to ensure the property would look its best for both the wedding and the subsequent visit from Mr. Caldwell. Amid all this bustle, Hannah found unexpected moments of quiet reflection. One evening, while sorting through her trunk for items to be pressed for the ceremony, she came across the original letter from Preston, or rather, from Patrick writing as Preston, that had convinced her to travel west. Reading it now, with the knowledge of its true authorship, Hannah could recognize Patrick's thoughtfulness in every carefully chosen word. The realization brought tears to her eyes, not of regret, but of gratitude for the strange, winding path that had led her to true happiness. When Patrick found her sitting among her belongings with the tear-stained letter in her hands, he immediately knelt beside her, concern evident in his face. "Hannah? What's wrong?" She shook her head, smiling through her tears. "Nothing's wrong. I was just reading your letter, the one that brought me here, and feeling thankful for all that's happened, even the painful parts." Patrick gently took the letter from her hands, his eyes scanning his own handwriting. "I remember laboring over every word of this," he admitted. Preston kept saying, "Make it sound more fancy, Patty. She's educated." But I wanted it to be honest too, about the challenges of ranch life, about the kind of partnership he was offering. "The kind of partnership you were describing," Hannah corrected gently. "Your words, even if they were meant to come from Preston." Patrick nodded, acknowledging the truth of this. "I suppose some part of me was writing what I wished I could offer someone myself someday." He set the letter aside, taking both her hands in his. "I never imagined that someone would be you." The wedding day dawned clear and perfect, with the kind of crisp September air that hinted at autumn while still holding the warmth of summer. Hannah dressed in her blue silk, hair arranged in a simple but elegant style adorned with wildflowers that Patrick had gathered for her at dawn. Looking in the small mirror, she hardly recognized the woman who stared back confident, glowing, so different from the uncertain traveler who had stepped off the stagecoach 5 months earlier. A knock at her door announced Maria, come to help with final preparations. The older woman's eyes filled with tears when she saw Hannah. "So beautiful," she murmured, adjusting a flower in Hannah's hair, "like the mountain sky after rain." "Thank you, Maria," Hannah said warmly, embracing the woman who had become both friend and substitute mother during her time at the ranch. "For everything." The ceremony took place in the meadow beside the house, where Patrick and the ranch hands had constructed a simple wooden arch draped with vines and late summer flowers. Nearly 60 people gathered to witness the occasion, neighbors from surrounding ranches, townsfolk from Salida, and even a few travelers staying at the hotel in town who had been invited on a whim. Hannah would forever remember the moment she walked toward Patrick across that sun-dappled grass. His face alight with a joy so pure it seemed to radiate from him like heat from a flame. She barely heard Reverend Miller's words, focused instead on Patrick's steady gaze and the solid warmth of his hands holding hers. Their vows were simple but heartfelt promises of partnership, respect, and unwavering love through whatever challenges life might bring. When Patrick slipped his mother's gold band onto her finger, Hannah felt the final piece of her new life click into place. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," Reverend Miller announced, beaming at the couple before him. "Patrick, you may kiss your bride." The kiss was brief but tender, mindful of their audience yet containing promises of more to come. As they turned to face their applauding guests, Hannah caught sight of something that made her catch her breath: 2 hawks circling high overhead, their wings catching the sunlight as they spiraled in perfect harmony. "Look," she whispered to Patrick, pointing upward. He followed her gaze, a smile spreading across his face. "Double circles," he murmured. "Seems fitting." The celebration continued well into the evening, with food and music and dancing under lantern light. As darkness fell, many guests departed for the journey home, leaving a smaller group of close friends to continue the festivities. Hannah and Patrick slipped away as the hour grew late, walking hand in hand to the house that was now truly their shared home. Later, as they lay tangled in each other's arms, the moonlight streaming through their bedroom window, Hannah traced the contours of Patrick's face with gentle fingers. "Happy?" he asked softly, catching her hand and pressing a kiss to her palm. "More than I ever imagined possible," she answered truthfully. "When I left Boston, I thought I was traveling toward a predetermined future. Instead, I found the freedom to choose my own path." "And that path led you to me?" Patrick said, wonder still evident in his voice. "To you," Hannah agreed. "To this ranch, these mountains." She nestled closer to him, sighing contentedly. "To home." The visit from Mr. Caldwell proved every bit as promising as they had hoped. The St. Louis businessman was impressed not only with the quality of the horses, but with the entire operation, particularly after Patrick showed him the meticulous breeding records Hannah had organized and the improved training methods they had developed together. "You've got something special here, Owens," Caldwell declared on his final evening at the ranch. "I'll take 10 horses now and contract for 20 more over the next year, if you can maintain this quality." The deal transformed the ranch's prospects overnight. With the security of Caldwell's contract, Patrick and Hannah could implement improvements they had only dreamed of: expanded stables, better irrigation for the pastures, perhaps even a small schoolhouse for the children of neighboring ranches who currently had to travel all the way to Salida for education. As autumn painted the aspens gold and crimson, Hannah found herself increasingly drawn to the idea of teaching again. Not in a formal school, perhaps, but in some capacity that would serve the scattered families of the valley. She mentioned this to Patrick one evening as they sat before the fire, her head resting comfortably against his shoulder. "I've been thinking about that too," he admitted. "There are at least a dozen children within riding distance who get minimal schooling at best. If we converted the old storage shed by the creek, added windows, a proper stove, it could make a fine small schoolhouse." Hannah lifted her head to look at him, touched by his understanding of her unspoken desires. "You wouldn't mind having your wife be a teacher as well as a rancher's wife?" Patrick chuckled, pulling her closer. "Mind? Hannah, one of the things I admire most about you is your mind. Why would I want to limit how you share that gift?" His expression grew more serious. "Preston and I came west to build something meaningful, something that would outlast us. A school would be part of that legacy." The project became their shared passion through the winter months. When snow made outside work difficult, Patrick and the ranch hands focused on renovating the sturdy shed into a bright, welcoming space. Hannah wrote to her former colleagues in Boston, requesting books and materials suitable for teaching children of various ages and abilities. By the time spring arrived, the little schoolhouse was ready, complete with a row of simple desks, a small library, and a bell to call students to lessons. Word spread quickly through the valley, and on the first official day of school in April 1877, 8 children arrived on horseback or in wagons, their faces a mixture of curiosity, excitement, and trepidation. Hannah welcomed each one personally, heart swelling with a sense of purpose as vibrant as her love for Patrick and the ranch. That evening, exhausted but deeply satisfied, Hannah found Patrick waiting for her on the porch of their home, a wrapped package in his hands. "For the schoolmistress," he said with a teasing smile, presenting it to her. "A first-day gift." Inside, Hannah found a beautifully bound journal, its leather cover embossed with her initials and the double circle brand. "For recording your observations and ideas," Patrick explained. "And someday, maybe, for sharing the story of how our school began. Hannah traced the double circles with her finger, thinking of all they symbolized: partnership, continuity, the unexpected journey that had brought her to this place and this man. "Thank you," she said, rising on tiptoes to kiss him, "for understanding what I needed, even before I fully knew myself." Patrick's arms encircled her waist, drawing her closer. "We understand each other," he said simply. "That's what makes us work." As twilight settled over the valley, painting the distant mountains in deepening shades of purple, Hannah leaned into her husband's embrace. 1 year ago, she had been a lonely schoolteacher in Boston, answering an advertisement from a stranger in a place she had never seen. Now she stood on the porch of a home filled with love, surrounded by beauty that still took her breath away, building a life richer than any she could have imagined. "Do you ever think about how differently things might have turned out?" she asked softly. "If Preston had lived, if I had decided not to come west after receiving news of his death?" Patrick was quiet for a long moment, his chest rising and falling steadily against her back. "Sometimes," he admitted. "But then I remember something my mother used to say. Life takes its proper course, even when the path seems twisted." Hannah nodded, understanding washing through her like the golden light that bathed the valley. "When I stepped off that stagecoach and saw you instead of Preston, I felt as if everything I had planned had fallen apart. I couldn't see that it was actually falling into place." Patrick turned her gently in his arms, his blue eyes reflecting the deepening sky above. "I knew the moment I saw you," he said simply, "standing there with your trunk and your determination, looking both lost and resolute. I knew you were meant for me." "And I for you," Hannah whispered, the truth of it resonating through her entire being. As the first stars appeared overhead, they stood together in the gathering darkness, 2 circles joined but distinct, creating something stronger and more beautiful than either could have achieved alone. Fall came again to the Colorado mountains, bringing with it the ranch's first truly prosperous harvest season. The horse breeding program had expanded successfully under Patrick and Hannah's joint management, with orders coming in from as far away as Chicago. The little schoolhouse now served 12 students 3 days a week, with Hannah dividing her time between teaching and ranch work in a balance that fulfilled both her intellectual needs and her love of this wild, beautiful place. On a crisp October morning, almost exactly a year after their wedding, Hannah stood at the kitchen window watching Patrick chop wood for the coming winter. His movements were strong and sure, his face peaceful in the slanting autumn light. Watching him, Hannah placed a hand over her still flat stomach, a smile touching her lips as she thought of the news she would share with him that evening. Their circle was expanding, just as Preston had once dreamed it would. Not in the way any of them had imagined, perhaps, but in a way that felt right, felt meant. The baby would arrive in late spring, when the wildflowers were beginning to carpet the meadows and the whole world seemed alive with possibility. Hannah thought of the journey that had brought her here, a mail-order bride arriving to find one brother gone and another waiting, her life taking a turn she could never have anticipated. She thought of Patrick's words on that fateful day, "You're meant for me." How right he had been, though neither of them could have known it then. They had been meant for each other all along, their paths converging despite grief and confusion, their separate circles joining to create something stronger and more beautiful than either could have imagined alone. As if sensing her thoughts, Patrick looked up from his work, his eyes finding hers through the window. His smile warm, intimate, full of shared understanding still made her heart quicken after all these months. Hannah smiled back, thinking of the future they would build together in this place that had become more than just a home. It had become the center of a life she had never dared to dream possible. A life that had begun with an unexpected arrival and 7 simple words, "You're meant for me."